So I got Ricky Williams here. I went on Ricky's pod last week. You guys have probably heard it by now because at this point, if you're listening, it's July. Ricky, that was fun, man. Tell the people about your pod if they haven't heard about your pod yet.
Yeah, so my podcast, I call it Curious Questions with Ricky Williams, and I bring astrology in. So I get my guest chart, I look at their chart, and I make a list of questions that I'm curious about based on the chart, and we dive in. And so the idea was to introduce people to astrology, but in a way that's real life, and getting my guest reaction to certain astrological insights or ideas.
He's laughing. He thought at one point in the interview, he was like, yo, you're being sarcastic. You're not. I'm like, dude, I'm taking this dead seriously. It's just some of the things that you were saying. It was so, and I'm a skeptic in every way, but like there were some things that were ringing true. I got the Venus moon.
Yeah, you got Venus in Aries. Yeah.
And so we had some commonalities that we identified.
Moon in Gemini. Yeah, the Gemini moon.
Gemini moon. Yeah. I'm working on it. The only way I was, and you told me like you can be a cross between the two because it's not as simple as like, hey, my birthday is X, so then I'm going to, be able to read Y.
Right.
So very interesting. If you are walking around on this planet, you have a horoscope. And you should probably check out Ricky's deal because it was a lot of fun, man. It was great. And all these years, man, like, it's funny because, and we talked a little bit about this last time we wrapped, but it was like, I've watched you from a distance for a long time and just really respected the way that you've carried yourself off the field and like the autonomy with which that you've seemed to operate. I know it's never that simple, but in my mind, I'm like, this guy does what he wants. And this guy follows his heart, which is a really hard thing for football players to do. And it was just cool connecting with you. I think in a lot of ways, you were way ahead of your time. Do you look back at Ricky Williams wearing a helmet in the early 2000s for interviews, proving the point that you were trying to make and say, hey, I was really onto something even more than I knew?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly. I say that to myself at least 5 times in a day. And I know from the outside, sometimes, it looks like a person does what he wants or they're ahead of their time, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just trying my best to survive. I think the biggest thing for me is I had so many misconceptions about what the NFL was going to be like, what my life was going to be like once I finally made it. And it was so different than what I imagined that I was in a bad way trying to adjust.
And you had the helmet on. Why? For the people who haven't heard the story.
Yeah, so it all started. It all started in the off season. It all started in the first day of started in the combine, but all started the first day of training camp. We were in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we landed in La Crosse, got off the plane, and there were a bunch of media standing there, and they had this magazine cover of me with Mike Ditka when I was wearing a wedding dress. And so already there was this tension between like the media, having certain ideas of who I'm supposed to be as an athlete, but me having an idea that I thought once I made it to the NFL, it meant that I can finally be myself now.
Right.
But I was perceived as being weird or strange. And so I just didn't like that. And then first preseason game, I get a high ankle sprain. And so, the first round draft pick, Saints traded all these picks. It was tough. And so it was one day in training camp after I sprained my ankle and I wasn't practicing, and it started to rain. And so I had my helmet on because it was raining. And then it was time for me to be interviewed. So they drove me in a cart to sit on a bench under this covered area. And as soon as I sat on the bench, someone yelled at me, "Take your helmet off." And I was like, it was just like dehumanizing for me. I was like, I'm a human being. Like, let me sit down and get comfortable, and then I'll take my helmet off. And so at first it started off as this act of rebellion. Like I'm a human being, and I've earned the right to sit down and get comfortable before I take my helmet off. And then it turned into a greater act of rebellion because I kept feeling like there was another time I was wearing my helmet and the reporter said, "Take off your helmet." And I said, "Why?" Because that was my question. And she said, "Because we want to see your eyes." And I said, "My visor is clear. You can see my eyes." Trying to have a real conversation. And for me, the deeper point was, the way I felt, at least, you want to see into my eyes, into my soul, and ask me questions, but you don't even see me as a human being. So it was kind of this rebellion, but it was just a protective mechanism, that I'm not going to give away my identity and what's important to me to you just because I'll get fined if I don't talk to you.
The irony of all that, I don't even know if I'm using the word irony correctly at times, but is that you're sitting here 10,000 yard back, so many amazing football achievements, and anybody who I talked to that played against you or with you is like amazing football player, okay? We all know that, but the reason people love you so much is because of who you are off the field outside of that helmet. So do you feel like you won? Because in a lot of ways, like, again, the whole ahead of your time theme is like, you were the modern athlete trying to fit, in my opinion, and a hell of a unique modern athlete at that, but you were trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Is like, they just weren't ready for that. The pushback, like from us, you know what I mean? And you push back.
Yeah, again, I mean, I was trying to survive. And I went through this big identity crisis. I mean, I was this big article about me struggling with social anxiety disorder because
right.
I was miserable. I remember every day walking into the locker room, just feeling like, once we got on the field, I was great,
Yeah.
Just everybody shuts up and it's really about, okay, like who's here to ball, but all the other stuff, it was a lot.
It's a jarring place to walk into no matter where you've been in life and like no matter what your upbringing was. Like an NFL locker room, especially in the old NFL, where you walk in and there's a bunch of like grown men. It's not like guys walking in now. And like when I was in St. Louis, I used to joke that like at the end of my career there, year 8, I had the best parking spot. And that means that I was like the oldest guy. I'm 30 years old. Like there were 15 30-year-olds when we got in the league. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's intimidating if you're not doing it right. You try to fit who you're supposed to be to like meet that expectation.
Exactly. And I started to like unconsciously go down that path, and I lost myself. And luckily I got some help and, started to find myself.
I do in a second want to go back to how you got to New Orleans because it was such a unique football condition, like, or situation that landed you there. But like Ricky Williams now, okay, removed from the game, you look happy, you seem happy, and happiness is fleeting, and it's like a battle your whole life. I feel like my whole life, it's like, how do I find balance? How do I achieve happiness? How do I get to this destination? And the destination's never coming, I guess, is the sick joke. But like, do you feel like you've arrived somewhere at all, or is it never about an arrival? Are you comfortable and happy in your life today?
I think it's both. I don't think you arrive at the destination, but I think you can arrive on your path. And I think I've arrived on my path, meaning, I feel like pretty much everything I do is meaningful, and so it's regardless, I don't even think of like a good day or a bad day, because it's, it's that feeling that, after 35 carries, my body hurts,
Yeah.
I'm limping, but we won. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's worth it. And that's what I got used to as a football player. And I think I've been able to bring that over into my life, that I wake up every morning and everything I do, it feels like it's worth it.
When it comes to that, the path you're on, not the destination, the path, where does football fit into that path? Where does looking backwards fit into that path? Because I think we really struggle, like, how proud am I supposed to be of my accomplishments? How do I look back in a healthy way? Like, how do I look back and be proud without like staying back there? Part of me, and you do some football stuff, I read. So how do you maintain that distance that I'm sure you think is probably healthy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think in general, and I think I'm at midlife now. So I think in general, when I look back, I can appreciate that everything that's happened in the past has prepared me for what I'm doing right now. And I think accomplishments are tricky. I think accomplishments bolster your ego enough to get to this point. But I think now that I'm at this point, the accomplishments don't mean as much, but the training, right? I realized that becoming a football player, me going through all of that stuff was just preparation for what's next. And that's where I find peace with it.
And that was an interesting thing that came up for you and me, like expectations when we were talking on your podcast. How many guys have ever turned down the NFL? How many, I can't speak for people outside our sport, but it's like when they come calling, we just answer. Like, I'm ready to give you, if I can give you 15, I'll give you 15 years. That's when I got in the league and you talk to guys around you, like, what are your goals? I want to play 15 years in the NFL. Call me weird, but I never had that goal. You know what I mean? Like, my goal was to be excellent at what I was doing, anything I was doing, competitive, excellent. Like, if you meet a teammate, they probably wouldn't tell you anybody want to win more than me. But I didn't plan on being a lifer, nor did I need it for my identity. And I think that's a tricky thing, is just because you're great at something, society tells you have to do that and you have to live that 24/7. There are other things you're great at. They're just telling you that you're great at a popular thing. You know what I mean?
See, I look at it, there's two kinds of greatness. There's that greatness that comes from your natural talent, where you're great at it, but you don't really grow as much. And then those things that you're great at, where you're just learning and you just have this passion, where as you become better, there's growth. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, football is one of those things that the athletic part, I'm an explosive person. So I had that natural ability. Where I could grow was just understanding the game, and really using my mind to analyze how to read the power play,
right? Which they don't run anymore.
Right. When we're playing, we're playing this defensive end. He likes the wrong shoulder, right? So maybe I might pop it out, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. He flow plays it, so I know the fullback will kick him, and I can get up inside of it. Like just analyzing the game. But I got to a point where you can only run power against so many defenses, where I just wasn't mentally challenged anymore.
Right.
And although on the outside everything was great with football, just internally I felt like there were so many other things that I wanted to do, and parts of myself that I wanted to develop more. But and it was one of those moments where it just dawned on me one day where, I was like, I have enough money. I feel good about what I've accomplished. And I realized that I could walk away.
Right.
And it just dawned on me. And I was like, oh, it was a scary thought, but it was empowering.
That is the scary part is the key word, because for so many years when I played, I was afraid of retirement. Like, I was just downright afraid of it. I wanted it so badly. I wanted life outside of football. And I think people have a hard time holding two thoughts in their head that they think are opposing thoughts, but they're not at all. That I could love every minute of playing the game Sunday and bust my ass, but want so badly to experience something else. And I had this just sinking FOMO a lot of times. And I said this to you on your podcast. The first time I saw Run, Ricky, Run was the last couple of days, getting ready to interview you, and I was like, get off my corner, man. Like, you're on my fucking corner. I wanted to go join the Peace Corps. Like, I was jealous of people that took a year off after college. Like, I just had this like almost toxic jealousy festering under all that, like, hey, I'm on top of the world. I play in front of 60,000 people. How about this hit of drugs I'm getting? Like, this is just pure adrenaline. And I want to win so badly. There was this unrest in my life. And I don't know if I was too cowardly to do it, but you did the thing that I think a lot of guys actually think hard about doing in their heart of hearts, but they're afraid to say it out loud, because then people will question your commitment to the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The truth is, when I left, I thought I was leaving for good, but it ended up I was gone for a year. And I think it would be beneficial for guys, especially when they're getting to that point of burnout, to take a year off.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys, had the opportunity this past year to opt out without a penalty. So I think it's a good idea, because I think when you start, like me, I started in 7th grade and went all the way through until my mid-20s. I didn't have a fall. And so all that FOMO of all the cool stuff that people got to do from the summer all the way until Christmas.
What is August? Like, right? Yo, until I retired, I was like, what is that month? Like, it's just, when you say August, I just think about those little, the water carts and like, being sore and bruises on my forehead and the holiday end. Yeah.
The burn mark on the forehead. Yeah.
When we had the old styrofoam, the asbestos helmets, where if you cut that helmet open, it'd be yellow inside. Now the guys got these gel helmets and shit. They feel heavenly on your head.
Yes.
But that's what August was. And then the fall, like, people used to be like, oh, I love the fall. Not that I drink coffee or that I'd like a pumpkin spice latte or anything, but people freak out over red leaves and shit. For 11 years, I hated the fall. Not because I hated football, because I associated with this grind that was so hard for people to to fathom.
Yes.
And then when you go away from it, it's really hard, which is one of the most interesting things about your break. When I retired for the first time and I trained to come back one time, it didn't work out. I realized it was going to be damn near impossible to get back on this horse mentally, because once you're out, it's really hard. You realize the further you get away, how fucked up that life is, right? And I don't know how you did that. You went away for a year and then decided to come back. Like, that's the thing to me. What's amazing is you having the balls to walk away, but what's even more amazing is you being like, oh, I think I'll come back to that super fucked up scene that made me miserable at times.
Yeah. I mean, I got super zen in that year away. And so I came back with it's a totally different attitude. And it was a completely different experience for me, and it was fascinating. I'm glad I did it. But the second retirement, I could feel it really quick, further I got away, I started watching football games and I was like, ooh,
yeah, dude. How about when I heard you were a cameraman on the field?
Yep. Sure was.
How'd you get that opportunity? How did that idea pop into your head?
ESPN, the magazine, they do a photo issue every year. And I guess they knew I was into photography. So they reached out and asked if I wanted to shoot the Super Bowl. And it was interesting because it was a year after I retired, and the team that I retired from, the Ravens, were playing in the Super Bowl, and it was in New Orleans where I started my career. So as I walked into the stadium that afternoon, same people that worked at the stadium when I played for the Saints were there. And so it was this really interesting way to end, kind of walk away from the game in the same place I walked into the NFL.
Where were you when the lights turned out?
I was in the north end zone, sitting down. It's really difficult to shoot football because you have to anticipate where the play is going to be, and you have to be in focus. And so it was a challenge. I got a couple good shots, but it was tough.
Were other photographers like trying to strike up conversations with you and ask questions? Because that's actually interesting. You put it that way, is like, you got to know where the game is going to be. And you, as soon as the ball snapped, you have a good idea based on like what the guard's doing. Is this runner pass? You know what I mean? And these camera folk, I mean, like, as hard as they work and they master that camera, you have a different mastery.
It's weird though. Like they have a knack, even though they don't know football, they just have a knack for like angles and where the ball is going to be. Like I was impressed. I was asking them questions about like, how do you guys know this stuff? Because it's a lot to process, and then there, especially the Super Bowl, everyone's competitive for the right real estate, the right location on the field. But it was a really fun experience.
I remember the first time I was hurt in IR and I went to watch the first game that I was in street clothes. It was 8 years into my career, and I was standing there on the sideline and I watched one of the hardest hits I've ever seen. And I don't know how normal that would have looked to me if I was on the field. You know what I mean? You got to be away from it to realize how violent it is. And I just figure when I read that, I was so interested to hear, kind of your takeaways from seeing the game up close like that. It was just wild. I want to go backwards to, you getting in the league to set up this year away, because it was so interesting to me. And again, I watched Run Ricky Run for the first time a week ago. You come in the league in New Orleans in a totally unprecedented fashion. I mean, you're already a legend, right? You play at the biggest legendary school. You're playing a legendary position. It's a legendary state. Like, just the elevation of like what football means in Texas is incredible to me. And you're like the president when it comes to football in Texas for a period there. So they gave up an entire draft to land you in New Orleans. And I just wonder how much differently your relationship with football might be had they not put you under such an unfair, spotlight immediately. Like, if you got drafted in the bottom of the first round on a winner and they didn't give up a whole haul to get you, would you feel any differently about ball your first couple of years?
Of course. Even if I would have been drafted a pick earlier by the Colts, and gone and played with Peyton Manning. And, my big thing is I put so much pressure on myself. I don't necessarily perceive it from the outside. For me, it was really, the people I had around me. And I think, and that's kind of my whole career. And to me, and the game has changed, thank goodness, that they realize you can have talent but it works better if you put multiple guys with talent around.
Yeah.
You know, when you in you know in New Orleans and in Miami, it's like we played defense and then offense. They just gave me the ball, and so I didn't have an opportunity to play with really an elite quarterback. I played with some pretty good quarterbacks, but I didn't have the opportunity to play with an elite quarterback. Later in my career, I split time with Ronnie Brown, and I had a blast.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like I was more productive. It was easier on my body, and we were winning. And so as the game evolved, you know, my game had to evolve from being the workhorse to being more effective.
Yeah, it feels like your entire career you were just being asked a lot, and like at a position where they ask too much of guys anyways. I mean, like from, hey, you got to live up to this, like we're going to mortgage the whole future of the franchise for one player, which no matter who it is. I always tell people it's so funny when you're evaluating draft picks. Like you have to consider the context and people just don't do it. But then to Miami where Wanstead is giving you the ball like 40 times a game. Was there ever a point where you and Dave had to have a heart-to-heart about like, hey, man, like you're killing me right now?
It's funny. We didn't have that heart-to-heart until 2 years ago, the Super Bowl in Miami. We were at an event together, and we finally had that heart-to-heart. Because the last time I talked to Dave before this was when I called him up and told him I was retiring.
Yeah.
And that didn't go too well for him. But we had that heart to heart, and he said, you know, the one thing that I learned was that I need to trust the quarterback.
Do you think the days of workhorse running backs are over, or can certain guys like you watch Derrick Henry? Are you waiting for the bottom to fall out? Not that you're rooting for that, but every year I'm like, he can't possibly do this again.
Well, he's still young, so I think, you know, if he can, as he goes on, I think if they can find another back where he can split time,
right.
I think that can extend the quality of his career. You know, I'd look like one of my best friends, Earl Campbell, you know, in the Hall of Fame, but you know, only made it 7 years in the NFL. But he dominated for those years, and so, you know, and for me, I was moving in that same direction until I retired, and I came back, and you know. The main reason was because no one could trust me,
right?
But I was splitting time. But again, I was making the same amount of money I was making when I was carrying the ball. I was taking better care of my body, and I was happier. So it worked out for me.
With Earl Campbell's physical health, I mean, like it's well documented. I mean, when I think of running backs that just gave it all, and you could really, like, people talk about kind of how beat up he is, and him being as tight as he is to you, did that ever place like no one plays scared. Okay, you can't play scared, but you can have fear, like a healthy fear of what's this going to look like physically for me down the line. Yeah. Especially you knowing people. Me, I knew my dad. You got a buddy like Earl Campbell. Like it's got to be in the back of your head.
Yeah. I don't even think it's fear. I think it's reality. And I think, you know, part of being young and part of what we do is we kind of have to live in non-reality, you know? And so it's funny you bring it up, because the year I decided to walk away from the game, I was talking to the Dolphins about renegotiating my contract, because the previous year I led the NFL in carries, separated both my shoulders, and I was just beat up. And so I started to realize I'm not going to be able to do this forever.
Yeah.
You know, the reality of I need to take care of myself and feel good about what I'm putting my body through for me to keep doing this. And then the Dolphins came back with what I felt was a insulting offer. And so I started to realize, okay, if they're not going to take care of me, I have to start learning to take care of myself. And that my whole thinking started to change.
Yeah, it's like, it's the ultimate team sport, but if you could give a young player any advice, it might be look out for number one, because nobody else is going to look out for you. And that's the hardest part, as a selfless person, to be a part of a team, but also look out for yourself. And like the guilt, like I heard you talk about this, or like your rookie year when you had your ankle injury, it was so quick and you feel the pressure of, you know, what's been bestowed upon you, and you're crying in the locker room.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell me that person doesn't care.
Yeah.
But that person also needs to look out for themselves too. And it's the disappointment when you get hurt. The first thing you do is all of a sudden, like when I got hurt, I walked around the locker room, or I walked into the building, and I'm a captain, and like I'm one of the most popular guys on the team, unless people secretly hated me. you see it in people's eyes and you start like almost out of self-consciousness, or like you think they're looking at you like you're just a coward. And I think that's the biggest cultural mind fuck of trying to take care of yourself in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny. The advice I got before I got into the NFL from Ironhead Hayward, he said, if you're hurt, don't play. Right. He said, because you might be 65%, but they're going to look at you and always expect 100%. And when he said it, I was like, I will never take that advice.
Exactly.
But I get it. I understand what he means. It's true. And I say the toughest part, in my opinion, of playing in the NFL is dealing with injuries, because there's this where you always this question of, can I play? Right. Can I play? And if you think about it, these are guys that are paid a lot of money to train and are really good athletes. And I'm going out there at 70%, somehow the adrenaline helps us get through it. But it's to me, that's the most stressful thing about the NFL is like, when you're hurt and you're trying to figure out, can I play?
Because nobody tells you what you can and can't do. Like, they take advantage of, very naturally, your drive to be like accountable to your teammates and to play through stuff. You know exactly what I mean. You're smiling because it's true. Fucking, you like, the worst thing is when they ask you like, what do you think you can do? Like, that's not my job. My job is to go until failure. It's your job as trainers and as coaches to protect me. Like, ideally, like, you tell me where the point of diminishing return is on me playing. You're the expert. But when they put it back in your hands, of course you're always going to play.
Yeah. I have an interesting story about this. And I tell this story a lot when I'm talking to people about astrology, because there's an astrological correlation.
I love it, dude. I'm in, bro. Let's talk about it, Ricky.
Yeah. So in astrology, the planet Mars, okay? The planet Mars has to do with courage.
Yeah.
Courage. Okay. And so when Mars is triggering something in our chart, we have to face a fear. Okay. Or something's going to happen to us. Right. That's the story. So this was 2007. 2007. And I was suspended for a year, and then I failed a drug test to get back in. And so my suspension was like a year and a half. And so I was reinstated week 10. Okay. Week 10 of 2007. And at this time, the Dolphins were 0-10. Okay. 0-9, hadn't won a game. I came back, practiced for a week, and we were going to play the Steelers on Monday night. Okay. And so, of course, I was like, finally, a year and a half away, I'm finally back. I practiced, got a lot of reps that week, and I was ready to go. And so we fly into Pittsburgh, and it's pouring down rain. Okay. So we go to the hotel. The whole next day it rains. Right. We go to the field, and there's like 2 inches of water sitting on the field. The field's so bad that we can't even warm up.
That feels bad anyways.
Yeah. And so this voice is telling me, I don't think it's a good idea that you play today, because these guys have been in training camp in 10 weeks. I practiced for a week after a year and a half off, and this field is crap. So I told myself, okay, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell Cam that I'm not going to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I walk in the locker room and I go up to him. He's like, how you doing? How you feel? Right? And I chickened out. I chickened out. I said I'm ready to go. Okay. And then, for like the first play of the second quarter, we run, a little trap. James Harrison comes off, like hits me, the ball pops out, and I'm on the ground and I'm pushing myself up to go after the ball. And Lawrence Timmons steps on my back and tears my pec right off my humerus bone. And I had surgery the next day and missed the rest of this. But I knew, right? But I chickened out. I wasn't courageous enough to tell him I'm not going to play. And sometimes I think taking care of yourself requires courage.
I remember that was one of the most bizarre, unlucky ways to get hurt, coming back week 10. I mean, I remember the play. Yeah. It's just like my brother came back and just got hurt in OTAs, and he's out for a while, and he had surgery. And it's like all that hard work that it takes to get back on the horse just for that to happen. I mean, it's got to been crushing.
Yeah. But I think though, there's a wisdom that we can play a brutal sport like this, or we can do things that are intense. And if we listen to that inner guidance, I think we can stay safe. But what overrides that, are these ideas about, team first. But I think in order to do team first, you got to be whole.
And masculinity. Like, hey, you know, the thing about our game is not only pressure packed. I don't want to pigeonhole like the NBA, which is it's a tough sport, like it's physical and that sort of thing. But the first thing you think about is if somebody's not good at it, they're not a wimp. They're not like less of a man. They just don't have a good jump shot. Or like, you know what I mean? Like if you're not good at football, there's almost like a masculinity thing that's tied up to it. So I just think the whole thing, it's interesting you illustrate that the bravest thing you could have done would have been to face Cam Cameron and be like, hey, coach, I'm sorry. And I know you're disappointed. I know you're disappointed with me, but look at that field, dude. It's week 10. These guys have been out here just like, and I know exactly what you mean, but that's interesting because you say facing fears. Ricky Williams at 44, what are you afraid of?
Honestly, the only thing that really scares me is that sometimes my wife gets in a bad mood that she's not.
Come on, man. You got nothing like sharks, snakes, dying, getting hit by lightning.
No. I'm honestly
You're past that.
Well, to the point of like, if I'm afraid, I'm just not going to be around sharks or snakes, right? Like,
okay.
And if I am, then I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be here, and I'll just go with it.
That's an amazing way of going through with it. It's an amazing way of going through with it. Okay, so you're the only rookie in New Orleans, which had to be weird because you're dealing with all the stresses that we just talked about, and you're at the lunch table. There's nobody to talk to, yeah?
Yeah.
You're the only rookie.
Yeah, it was rough because, again, we had a veteran team, so there's a lot of grown-ass men in there, and I walked in, making just as much money as them and getting all the attention. And so, I think that's how it should be. They were like, okay, prove it to me. And I think the way I worked out, the way I trained, I proved it to them. But the season started, I was hurt. And then I was trying to prove it to them by playing with the dislocated elbow and playing with the high ankle sprain, Until that first season, I managed to, I like fought through like these difficult injuries, and I got to week 10 and without missing a game. And then I had a turf toe and I ended up missing 4 games. So it just was a dealing with injuries. Like I said, the most stressful part of the game. And up until that point through college, I had bumps and bruises, but nothing I couldn't play through.
Fast forward in 2004, we've talked about, and everybody knows, your time away from football the first time. You make that decision right before training camp. You talk about another thing that took courage to really, I mean, I can remember year 10, I was close to retiring physicals day. Like I was in line for physicals and in my head was like, yo, fuck this. No, it was year 11. It was my last year. And I just remember thinking like, this is the last place I want to be on the planet, dude. Like on the planet. And I was too afraid. Like I was too afraid to just be like, hey, walk out of the building because that's what I want to do. You did it in the prime of your career. Who was the first person you told and what was their reaction?
Here's how it went down. So I was it was Memorial Day weekend and I lived in South Beach. I had a place in South Beach. I had a place in Fort Lauderdale. And I was walking downstairs in my place in South Beach, and my concierge always used to bug me to go to parties. And I was in a good mood that day. And so I said, when's the next party? And he looked at me and he said, it's Memorial Day weekend. All the parties are over in Miami. It's too hot. So you're going to have to wait until November. And he said, the season is over. Okay. And I started thinking the season is over. Right. And I was thinking about my career and how my attitude towards football was changing. And it was kind of scaring me. And I started thinking, is the season of football for me, is it coming to an end? And I was thinking, when the seasons change in nature, it's natural, right? They don't fuss or fight. It just happens naturally. And I said, okay, what if I'm just shifting into a different phase of my life? And with that thought, I had this sense of like lightness and expansion and kind of excitement. And then I had this scary thought that said like, well, what about your career? And what about your fame? And what about all the money and the houses and all that stuff? And as I sat with it, I realized I don't care about those things. And it kind of shocked me a little bit, like, okay, now what do I do now? And then the mistake that I made was I was really good friends with Lenny Kravitz's personal assistant. And at the time they were in tour in Europe. And it was that window after OTAs before training camp, that month and a half before.
Which doesn't feel like a break.
Right. Exactly.
Dark
And so
cloud.
usually,
Everybody else is having fun. I'm like, you don't feel this cloud? It's training camp.
so I'm telling you. So I was in right, and so I was in Miami under that cloud.
Number
and
one
then,
time to impromptu retire, by the way, is July for a player.
so I was in that cloud, and she called me up, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, we have a break." And she was like, "Why don't you come join us?" And I was like, "I can't." And then I was like, "Wait a minute, actually, I can."
So true.
So, I got on they're in Zurich. So I got on the next flight and met him in Zurich. And then so I spent 2 weeks with him, right? And then I was like, okay, I could be doing this, or I could go to training camp.
So that's the thing. I mean, the choice is clear.
Yeah, it became quite clear. Yes.
I mean, and here's the funniest thing, and this is part of the reason and this is a larger conversation about marijuana and that sort of thing, but a lot of people have classically framed it as you chose marijuana over football. Is that true?
It's kind of true, but it's not true. It's true symbolically of meaning I chose a life that was more me than trying to fit into a box of something that wasn't me.
You actually chose Lenny Kravitz's assistant over football, but if you, it's incredible. If you ever write a book, there should be a chapter called Lenny Kravitz's assistant.
Yeah,
I can see it now. You're calling people. I'm so glad you said this, because one of the things I was curious about with you is everybody was framing it like this guy's crazy because you were doing something that nobody does, and like, oh, this guy's got problems because he's doing something that goes against the grain, and it kind of made me think about if somebody calls me with some idea that I think is batshit crazy because it's against like societal norms, they're actually maybe not going through anything. They're actually onto something. And maybe like, has your process kind of affected the way that when a buddy calls you and tells you something that seems crazy, like that, how you receive that to give advice then?
I've always been like that. Like when my friends or my family call me with the crazy idea, I'm usually proud of them.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know,
I know what you mean.
I'm usually proud of them. And then I'm like, okay, like then I want to understand how they got there. And usually, you know, it makes sense. And I look at things from a different perspective, but yeah, because I've realized, you know, my most rewarding decisions have been crazy, you know, where I trusted that crazy voice inside.
Somebody has to tell me why not, dude. Like, hey, literally, if you spell it out to me, if you can successfully illustrate to me why I shouldn't do this, then I'll listen.
Yeah.
But if you can't, if all you got is like, well, other people aren't doing it, then I'm not crazy, dude.
Yeah. And
I just think that was interesting because, you know, there was certainly the marijuana stuff, which again, like ahead of your time. When Dan Patrick asked me after I retired about marijuana, I didn't, in saying, yeah, like I smoke my fair share of it. That was my own way on national radio of saying, like, I fucking smoke every day, Dan. I smoke the man of the year here. Okay. So you can too, and you can be a man of the year too, and you can be a 2 times. Like, whatever, dude. I wasn't saying it setting out to be an activist.
Right.
I was just being honest. I was living in my truth. And like, I also feel like a lot of people apply realities to your life because you use a plant. Like all of a sudden that's who you are. It's not a part of your life. Like all of a sudden I had this identity, you know, and even the people that were supportive of me were getting on my nerves because they were like, hey man, let's meet up and smoke a doob. And like, you know, like that's not my life. Like, yes, I like to get high, but I do a million other different things. And I wonder if there was ever a resentment with you when it came to people putting you in a box with that.
Well, the resentment comes because I think it's overshadowed my actual football talent and what I actually did on the field. And that, you know, that bothers me because I think, like you said, most of the people that played with me or played against me will testify that I played hard, that I was, you know, a talented football player. And they knew when they played against me that, you know, it's going to be a long day.
Right.
And to me, that's what matters is my peers. But again, I think it's unfortunate that the story of me as a football player sometimes gets overshadowed by the cannabis stuff.
Yeah, that's how I feel about charity with me. There is something to like, hey, motherfucker, I was a 10,000 yard back. There's 30 that ever walked the planet, and I took time off and I still did that. If I'm you, that's my biggest axe I'm grinding is like, I got what I wanted, like that everybody sees me for me, but hey, don't forget, I could tote the rock. Yeah. And that's how I felt about my skills. I mean, obviously I never joined the 100 sack club, maybe stuck around a while, but I do feel like at times I'm like, yeah, I know I'm like community service guy, but don't forget I could play.
Because I think it's hard for people to hold both, right? It's hard for people to hold both, but for me, it's a beautiful thing.
People called you an addict. Joe Theismann said you were an addict when you went to play in Canada. It's just incredible how far. Do you blame people in 2004 like that might be totally different now in 2021? Do you harbor any? I watch people that sounded like idiots talking about you who are respected journalists.
I didn't blame anyone because I understood. Because part of me was feeling like the way that they were feeling about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I completely understood, but I also understood that I had to go on my own journey.
How did marijuana, what slot in your life did that fill? Like why for you did you start using marijuana? And then like as an athlete, how was it beneficial to you? How is it beneficial to you today, Ricky, the 44-year-old dad?
Yeah. So I'd say I started really developing a relationship my senior year in college. I came back my senior year to win the Heisman Trophy, and we started off the season kind of rough. I had a really rough game against Kansas State. I think I had like 12 carries for 43 yards. And that same week, I found out my girlfriend I just broke up with was dating our quarterback.
What?
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, it was a rough week. And
not the one that was playing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to take this hand off from you, dude.
Exactly. That's it was one of those. It was one of those years. Okay. So it was rough. All right. And my roommate saw I was struggling, and he was a smoker. So he was like, he said, you need to just chill. And he said, here. And I'd smoked a couple of times, but I hadn't really developed a relationship. And I remember I just took 2 hits from the bong. And it was the first night I wasn't obsessing about the game or obsessing about my ex. And we went to Blockbuster and watched Blazing Saddles. And I laughed my ass off. And I, after that, back-to-back 300-yard games. And so, I realized there's something to this, and I was I realized I was one of those guys that just takes things too seriously.
Yeah.
If I just chilled out a little bit, that things would go better. And so it was really kind of the beginning of my adult spirituality of just realizing, okay, that there's more going on, right? Than just, it's not just about me. And so I think it felt good. It felt good to have to think bigger thoughts and to think outside of just football. And so I started to consume my free time using cannabis because I liked the mindset that it put me in. And I remember those times where I'd come home after practice and I'd smoke a little bit. Then I started reflecting on my life and thinking, how can I be a better running back? How can I be a better father? How can I be a better boy? And I really liked that. And it's something I wasn't getting that quality of interaction in the football world. And eventually it got me to think about doing things other than playing football. And I think, it led me to eventually to realize that I had an opportunity to do something else. And I was able to make that choice. And my life would be so different if I didn't have that year off. I'd be a completely different person.
It's so funny because I didn't start in like high school or anything like that. I didn't smoke till my freshman year. And my first time, I'll always remember it. There was a movie involved too. We were in Boise, Idaho for that fucking bowl game up there with the blue turf. And me and a couple teammates will go unnamed. We just sat in the room and watched Bring It On. And I just remember thinking, my God, this movie's amazing. And I know the movie's not that good. But for me, there was a long break, though. To your point, like I didn't have a relationship with it through college because I was so afraid of getting caught and losing my scholarship or whatever it was. Like I knew how to stay out of trouble. That didn't mean I pushed the limits. And I was a problem drinker. I was a college kid. So I was doing something else that I didn't realize that by the time you're 24 or 25, it just doesn't fit you the same. Yeah. and you fight it and you fight it, but it just doesn't fit you the same. And here I am, 36. I still like drinking beer, but I didn't start until I got in the league and I couldn't sleep. Like literally, it rescued me from probably addiction to sleeping pills. Honestly, which so many people, I'm not saying it like I'm one of the only people in the world who have been addicted to sleeping pills, something to get to sleep at night. But, you know, when you're chewing up Lunestas and you're doubling the dosage, it makes no sense. And I can remember my life changed the day I could start buying predictable, good weed, which was another plus. Like back when you were in college, like who the fuck knows where you're getting your bud from?
Exactly.
Like by the time I was my 8th year in the league, we go for 2-day trips to Seattle. Like there are stores. Okay. Yeah. Like what kind do you want? Like, so things change for me. And I would say like just that feeling in July of I don't have to stop because I'm worried about the one drug test, which is so arbitrary in camp. And I'm not going to go back to the sleeping pills or pain meds or that sort of thing. My life was so bad those 3 weeks every year. And just to get away from the game and be able to just be me, which includes that, is nice.
It's funny you say that. That's how I got popped, because when I was in New Orleans, it was every training camp. For the first couple of days of training camp, we get tested. And then I got traded to Miami and they tested OTAs.
Yeah.
And no one told me until I showed up.
That's a motherfucker, dude. Are you kidding me?
I showed up to work one day and they're like, annual piss test. I was like, huh?
For what? You want to see if I'm hydrated? Hey, dude, if they showed up, like I'd be in a panic. Like I'd be like, you couldn't have told me, I'd be done for the year. That's the biggest thing for people that don't understand is, and now the threshold is raised or it's lowered. So now it's easier. And essentially now it's, but they would have a position group through the summer, like every time we got together. And they always, like, I don't know about the running backs, but the DNs were always at the end. Yeah. It's like they made us wait. They just knew we were the ones waiting. We were the main ones waiting, D linemen. So yeah, so we were just waiting, and they'd wait till like 2 weeks into training camp sometimes. And I'm like sitting there, I need you more now than ever. And I can't. But anyways, I just think it's interesting because it's not who you are, but it's a part of your life. I wonder, have you ever like said to yourself, I'm abusing this stuff. I'm using it too much.
There's been times. Yeah. There's definitely been times where it's not, I wouldn't go that far, but I'd say, why am I doing this? Right. At least just checking in. Like, what am I doing this for? Because, I think like anything that makes you feel good can be abused. And I think just to be honest enough with yourself to check in is important.
Yeah. Really look yourself in the mirror and be like, are you not being productive right now because of something that you're enjoying a little too much of? Your mental health. I mean, that's something that like, intertwines for me as somebody with anxiety. Marijuana helps with that. As somebody certainly, insomniac, marijuana helps with that. I read you talk about it was like almost, well, you go ahead. I'm not going to, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I walk into the locker room in New Orleans and I just was like, I didn't want to be there. And I just felt so anxious and uncomfortable around my teammates, and even worse, meeting fans. And I think a lot of it was, I just was hurt. I was hurt the whole time. And so my identity as being the best football player was completely taken away. And so I didn't want to be around. And I remember watching television, and there was a commercial for Paxil, and they do those pharmaceutical commercials, and then they list all the symptoms.
Oh boy.
And I saw the symptoms and I was like, holy shit, that's me, And so I called my friend and I said, I think I need to talk to a therapist. And so she hooked me up and I started talking to this woman, and pretty quickly she was like, yeah, I think you could benefit from Paxil. And this is called social anxiety disorder. And for me, like my warrior mind went to, okay, I know what it is. I could deal with this. And from that point on, I started working on myself and realizing what I came to realize is that I'm just a sensitive person. And as long as I understand that and I come to terms with that, then it doesn't have to turn into anxiety.
When you left for a year, you went to Australia right away?
I went to Australia, yep.
Was there a moment in your travels, because you were all over the place out there, where you just sat there on a beach or something or at a coffee shop and you were like, I'm finally alone?
There were a couple moments. So I had a moment in Australia. And so after I retired, Dan Le Batard, Was
I know
writing for
Dan.
ESPN
Yeah.
magazine and Miami Herald, and him and I were best friends. And so when I retired, he wrote like these really glowing pieces about how proud he was of me, you know, being the athlete to walk away and all that great stuff. Okay. And it was a cool story, right? And I was like, all right, this is, you know, it's going over well. And one night Dan and I were on the phone, and we had talked about one day writing a book together, you know, and I said, we were talking on the phone that night, and I said, you know, when we write the book together later, it'll be interesting to talk about the drug test. And Dan said, what drug test?
Mm.
And I said, you know, before I retired, I failed a drug test and I called the NFL and retired. And he said, what do you mean? And he started to get like really anxious. And I didn't understand what was going on. And he's like, I have to write this. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, we're best friends and we're having a conversation. And what do you mean you're going to write this? He's like, he said, it's ethically, I have this information and I'm part of the media. I have to write this. And I was thinking to myself, like, no way, right? Until we get off the phone, and sure enough, wake up the next morning, and the legend of Ricky and cannabis begins. Okay, it begins. And so that, you know, that's kind of how it all got started.
Golly. So then you escape, you get out of Dodge.
And so when this happens, you know, first it was going over like smooth, and then this hits, and that's when all the story of pothead Ricky, you know, quits. So everywhere on the media, like it's all that I'm seeing, you know. And so I'm kind of like, all right, I really don't want to go. I really want to go out now. And of course, my friend calls and she says, you know, I'm going to Samoa next week. Would you like to come? And I was like, yes. So we went to Samoa, and then from Samoa, we went to Fiji. We're in Fiji, and I was like, you know, Australia is just 2 hours away, and I really love that place. And so I said, I'm going to go back. There's this lighthouse in this town called Byron Bay on the east coast of Australia. So I flew to Sydney, took a Greyhound to Byron Bay, and thought I'd be there for a weekend photographing this lighthouse. Ended up staying there for a month and a half. And you know, about a month in, I met this guy who lived in the swamp. This guy named Steve. And he was like straight out of a Central Casting, you know, just a very earthy guy who just loved plants, you know, and he even had a couple of cannabis plants. Most sweetest, most beautiful cannabis I ever saw. This guy was like, he had this gift with just growing things, you know, like he grew these papayas that were like twice the size of normal papayas. And so he just knew all the indigenous plants. And so every day we would walk, and he would just talk to me about the history of the plant and the history of Australia. And I think just with him and that relationship, I just found a place of peace. And, you know, I grew up a very religious person. And one of the things that Stephen had, he had a Bible. And he said, here, I want you to like read this. And I was like, sure. And so I remember I started reading the gospel. And I came across this passage in Matthew. And it said, basically, if you leave home and family and all that stuff in search of me, it'll all be given back to you 100-fold.
Right.
Okay. And that in that moment, I had that sense of peace that I knew that as crazy as everything was, I knew I was exactly at the right place, the right time where I was supposed to be and doing exactly what I needed.
One of the hardest things about faith to me, I'm glad you brought that up, is like, you've seen everything. Like you've seen, I feel like every corner of the world as much as you could. And, you know, as you meet people, everybody believes in something different. So like, how do you choose one? You know what I mean? And somebody's got to be right, which means everybody else has to be wrong. Like, that's why I don't buy into organized. I mean, like I believe in a higher power. I'm faithful, but it is really hard for me to talk to a preacher who says a kid in East Africa is going to hell because they didn't accept the word of God, you know, because they're Muslim and their parents raised them Muslim and vice versa. And it's just the way I don't know what you make of faith at this juncture in your life.
Well, I think if you really read closely, all the religions say faith has to be something that has to be tested, right? That the only thing that you can truly know and believe in is what you've experienced. So all the scriptures say, you know, take what your parents teach you or what society teaches you and test it out for yourself. And I think that's how you develop faith. And I think that especially in this day and age, I think I think we need religion, but not organized religion. When I say religion, I mean the practice of whatever we believe in, and I think we have to believe in something and do our best to live according to those beliefs. And that's why I love astrology, because it gives everyone their own personalized religion.
That's so interesting. I'm just starting that journey, Ricky. The Gemini moon, the 12th house is the giving
12th
house.
house. 12th house.
Giving house
is the sacrifice. The house.
There we go. I remember. See, you were looking at me during that podcast like he's just not motherfucker. I listened to the whole thing. Hey, when it came to Steve, and like when I watch Run Ricky Run, those guys you met in Nevada City, which you got to tell me how you picked Nevada City.
Yeah.
Yeah. You seem to gravitate to some people that don't need anything from you. Why is that? I mean, it sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people gravitate towards people that are dependent on them.
Yeah. How it is. Like when, being a professional athlete, like we become very sensitive to people that that want something from us. And so for me, it just became a thing when that was not there, it just felt better. And so I would gravitate towards that because, when someone wants something from you, they've already decided who you are and what you have to offer. And right. For me, like what I was as an athlete was great, but it wasn't what I have so much more to offer. And so I just would gravitate to those people that could see something else in me, something deeper in me that I was trying to find and I was trying to bring to the surface.
It was just so funny. It was the funniest pairing of dudes in Nevada City. They Run Ricky Run, if you've seen it. They're interviewing these guys. And I'm sure like there was a moment where you meet these random cats, and for the people that haven't seen it, I guess, Ricky, the first place you came back to when you left your world tour in 2004, you end up in Nevada City, California, and there's a bunch of dudes that just are regular as hell, just normal guys, football fans, obviously, but they just weren't. They seemed to accept you as a normal dude, and that's what you would play poker with these guys. What else would you do with these dudes?
Yeah, so the way I got to Nevada City was when I was in Australia, I wanted to buy a big chunk of land. But, the price of the land, they have laws where I had to become a resident of Australia. So I went to the immigration office and talked to the attorney, and they gave me the paperwork to apply for citizenship. So I went home, started filling out the paperwork. Mm-hmm. They had this page at the very end that basically was like, what's your skill? What are you going to do when you come here? And so I started going down this long list of occupations, and I got to the bottom and I was like, damn, I don't have a skill,
I need to go to trade school.
Exactly. That's exactly. And so I started thinking, what do I want to learn? And when I was traveling, this guy gave me this book on something called Ayurveda, and it just blew my mind. And so I thought, I want to study that stuff. And so I looked online to see if there are any schools in the U.S. that train people in Ayurveda, and I found that there was a school. The semester started in a week and a half, and it was in this town called Grass Valley. And so I drove up there that next day to enroll, and it was like I drove into the town, and it was October, so the leaves were changing colors. And it was just like this beautiful, like idyllic place, and I was like. I didn't even know places like this existed. There's an old gold mining town. Yeah. Okay. And so I enrolled in school and I started taking classes there and found this cute little cottage. I love that place. And so about a week into living there, I had to go to Radio Shack to get something for my computer. Remember Radio Shack?
Yeah, my dad was in some of those fucking commercials. Yes, you were like, you were sitting in your Nevada City, which by the way, that little house looks so chill. Like, yeah. That feeling when you just feel like I was watching and I was like, damn, that place looks amazing.
It was.
And what'd you have, a Jeep outside? Was that a Jeep?
I had a Jeep and a Hummer.
That shit was dope.
Yeah, it was awesome. And so about a weekend, I went to Radio Shack and got Charlie, was my buddy.
Yeah.
He was looking at Radio Shack and I was like getting something from my computer and he walked up to me. He was like, I think I know who you are. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you're pretty cool. And I was like, all right, thanks. So then I paid for the stuff and I walked outside to my car and he comes running in after me and he taps me on the shoulder and he gives me, those old film containers.
Yeah.
He hands it to me and I'm like, okay. And I opened it and there's like 2 buds in there. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, okay. I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, this place is kind of cool. And so a day later, I took my Hummer down. There's a river in Nevada City. And I took my Hummer down this off-road, awesome track down to the river. And as I was coming back up, there was this guy on his bike and he was stuck in the mud. So I got out and I helped him. I threw his bike in the back of the Hummer and took him to the top of the hill. And he said, "Thank you, man." And he reached out and he like put his hand out and there's a couple of nugs. And I was like, I like this town, and I didn't know, but that area, Nevada County, is one of the the biggest cannabis growing counties in all of California.
I feel like that's like in Murder Mountain area.
Yes, it is. And in the next town over was Grass Valley, right? And who knew? But I end up in this town where I actually become a hero when people find out I'm there, and people literally are just giving me pounds of cannabis. Just
good bud too.
Yes,
presumably.
Yeah, it was great. It was great, and so it was just cool to leave the NFL and within 6 months find myself in this like place where I was celebrated and appreciated for it.
And then you find yourself back in a locker room. And does it feel like the first day you're back? Is it like you woke up from a good dream, or
to be honest, like we're warriors, right? And we do need time to get away and to relax, but that fire burns. And the truth is, I wouldn't say I was getting bored, but I knew I needed to eat, right? I needed that break to heal and to recover and to find myself. But I also had this feeling that the way I left, I needed to come back and do it better. I needed to get my name right if I wanted to have the kind of life that I wanted to have. So I approached it as a mission, almost as even like a spiritual mission, that I'm going to go back and see if I can finish this and walk away on my own terms.
Can you remember a veteran or a player, because you're a vet at this time, who kind of was an asshole to you when you came back? You don't have to name names, but were there guys that were just like, dude, like you're not serious about this like we are?
There was one guy, and I'll name him because we squashed it. But Jay Feely,
Really?
Yeah.
A kicker? No offense.
Yeah. I was gonna say a fucking kicker, but yeah.
I mean, okay, I'll say it. A fucking kicker was giving you shit about like abandoning the battlefield.
Yes, yeah.
No offense.
We squashed it, and we were, once he got to know who I was, like got to know me, because he wasn't there. He wasn't there when I left. He just came after I left, and so we got to know each other, and we were cool.
But dudes, I think Jason Taylor was talking about you, and like probably felt good to hear some dudes who were like legit OGs and guys that you might have looked up to approving of your journey.
Yes, it felt wonderful, and because deep down inside, the guys they understood, And I think that the biggest thing for me was after that, when I came back, I wasn't trying to be someone else anymore. Like people already knew that I was different, and so I felt free just to be myself. And because of that, I think the rest of my career was so much more fun.
It's amazing. You spend all this time worrying about what other people think about you, and it turns out they don't give a fuck. So you might as well make yourself happy and look in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, I like this guy.
Yeah.
Like this is a day you just wake up one day.
But the truth is, even if they do give a fuck and write stories about it, that stuff blows over and everyone forgets.
Exactly. That's my thing. I told my brother this the other day, because of his injury, I was like, listen, whenever you finish up, you're going to realize that all these criticisms and the praise alike, when you move to whatever sleepy town you move to, and when you go do your radio gig or your podcast like me, when you're washed up like I am on this side of it, like you'll realize how quickly people move on. Yeah. And good and bad. So why are you spending any time worried about what people are thinking of you bad? Like, yeah. So I just, and another thing that was interesting, we were talking on your pod about, was I could sense it. And I was mentioning how relieved I felt, like and here I am preaching about self-acceptance, and I couldn't accept myself for 10 years in the league until I won a Super Bowl, not the first one, the second one. Okay. Like how much work do you think I had to do to feel good about my career? But like, but that year I guess it was 2009, and it just felt like the tone of Run Ricky Run. It was like I'm good now, dude.
Yeah, to come back and to rush for 1,000 yards, while I split time most of that year, it was redemption. It was the same year that Run Ricky Run came out, so it was just it was one of those special. I was the team MVP. It was one of those special years, a year of redemption where I felt like, okay, and that's when the Dolphins dropped the lawsuit against me, because I come back and I accomplished my goal and made it right.
Do you think you'd get along with the Ricky Williams in that doc?
Yeah, I do, because I think I would have pushed him. You know, I think I would have pushed him, and I think he would have appreciated it. And I think that's one of the things that I learned about myself is I love to be pushed.
Yeah, you gotta be probably. I mean, it's like you need it. We were talking about how you need to be curious and you need to like be active and that sort of thing, but you also need to have something to wake up to
Yeah,
every day, like something to answer to.
That's what I loved about football, because it was one of those things where every day going on that field, there was an opportunity to get better. You know, it was a requirement to get better. You know, a lot of guys didn't step up to it, but I loved it. I loved it. And every day I walked out there, I asked myself, okay, one way, like how can I get better in one way today?
In 2011, you out of in Baltimore. This is the tail end of your career. You've got Cam Cameron up there as your OC.
Fuck it, man.
Do y'all get along?
Well, I mean, he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. I'm trying to say nice things. He's a nice guy, and so I'll be honest. He's a nice guy, so he's easy to get along with. But he's also one of those coaches that's full of shit, you know. And
you mean like 70% of coaches? No offense to coaches, they probably tell you 70% of players actually can't play. Well, I'm telling you, 70% of coaches are making shit up sometimes.
Yes. Like that's what I loved about Nick Saban. Like people might say he's a prick, but you knew exactly what he was telling you was the truth.
That's the same way I feel about Bill.
Yeah,
getting to play for him for a year. You know, like I played for a lot of coaches, and actually, you played for more than me. I did the whole list. I was going to make you see if you could name them all. But like that's the thing is, you don't realize how much you appreciate the coach that shot you straight until you're done. You know, when you're in it, you want a buddy. You know, you want a buddy. It's not that you're willing to take a mile when they give you an inch, but you want any like safe harbor you can get. It's a really tumultuous time. But then you walk away and you're like, I really appreciate that coach that was an asshole to me sometimes, as long as he was telling me the truth.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So because did Cam lie to you before you went to Baltimore? He told you you'd play and then...
Well, you know, that whole situation, no, it just was it was a situation where Ray Rice was the starting running back when I signed with Baltimore. And I was used to splitting time. Ronnie and I split time. And when we got there, you know, Harbaugh was the kind of guy where he put the whole offense on Cam. And so I would talk to Cam and Cam would say, okay, yeah, we're going to find ways to get you involved in the game plan. Because to me, it's not necessarily touches, but at a vet, I need to be involved in the game plan. Like even if it's like, you know, short yardage and some goal line stuff or a couple of plays on third down, just put something so I know that like I have a role. You know, this idea of where it turned into whenever Ray got tired, then I would go in the game. And that's not what we talked about. And then as we went through the season and tried to address it, he would say he would address it, but then Ray just would go up to him. I'd have a couple good runs and Ray would go up to him and then, you know, he put Ray back in the game. So I just didn't I like coaches who see what's best for the whole team and don't kowtow to certain players.
Did you have a couple years left in you think, physically?
I could have played 2 more years. Yeah. I could have played 2 more years.
And as you're sitting on the sideline with the camera, are you like, damn, I just missed it by a year, you know?
So when I decided to retire, I knew the Ravens were going to go. I knew the Ravens were going to. I knew they were going to the Super Bowl. I knew it because there were certain things that I experienced in Baltimore that I never experienced anywhere else. Remember the second preseason game that we played when I got there, we were playing against, at the time, the Redskins. And like they punted and our returner muffed the punt. Okay. Right. Nobody on the defense put their head down. Nobody had a look. They just got up and ran on the field. And I was like, wow, like I haven't been around a team that when things go bad like that they don't put their head
deal.
And it was, and they had a saying, no hand claps and no butt slaps, meaning if you make a mistake, don't do that. Don't do that. You know, just keep it moving. Okay. That was the first thing where I was like, okay, this team is special. And the second was we lost to the Patriots in the AFC Divisional Championship game. Billy Cundiff missed like a 20-yard field goal that would have sent us into overtime after Lee Evans dropped a touchdown pass.
Kickers, okay? Man, no offense.
Yeah. So okay. And so this is, an hour after the game, we're on the bus after, Billy just missed a field goal, and Billy's sitting like next to me right here, and I'm just feeling bad for the guy.
Yeah.
The rest of the team starts to come on the bus. Okay. Before the bus takes off, the guys are already talking about coming back and getting after it next year. I knew with that attitude, I knew this team was going to the Super Bowl. I knew it. And so I was at peace with that. I was at peace with that. And I think maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I think one of the hardest things to do for a veteran sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes is change teams. Because there's a certain level of respect, and when you're at a place for a certain one, there's a certain level of respect that's allotted to you, and people know you and they appreciate things about you. And then when you're older, having to go somewhere else and have to prove yourself again, especially for me, when there's a guy like a really good running back, Ray Rice, in front of me. And, it was funny, after when I called John Harbaugh to retire, he said, I think one of the biggest mistakes we made this year was not getting you more involved. And one of our biggest conversations we've had is how to get you more involved in the offense next year. And I said, that's great, but I was at a point where there are so many other things that I wanted to do that it just couldn't justify sitting on the bench and dealing with that for another year.
And it's so true, though. You nailed it, because I told telling my little brother, giving him advice when he's changing teams, I'm like, dude, just be ready for the fact that you're going to feel disrespected a lot. And it's not like the disrespect where, like, earlier in your career, like, you can take disrespect and spin it because you got 70 snaps.
Yeah.
Like if I get disrespected, I take it out on somebody. You get disrespected and they're like, all right, you got 12 plays or something. You get your little you get your little short yardage or. Yeah. So what do you like? The first day I'm in Philly, they put me on the rookie field, dude. I got more sacks than anybody in the building. I say this all the time. I'm like, that illustrates to you what it's like being a vet.
Yeah.
Like, and if you can't handle that, you shouldn't stick it out and bounce from team to team. And I got to tell you, it's just me being real. I could not handle it. I couldn't handle being disrespected and not having an outlet.
Glad you said it. Yeah, that's real talk.
I mean, and that was part of the reason I retired. Part of it was being fed up, but and just like, hey, I'm 33. I've done everything I want to do, dude. Like, do I want to be walking around like my dad? But part of it was like, you know what? Fuck this, dude. The little things, you know what I mean? And they add up. And I wonder if Baltimore felt a lot the same way.
I'm telling you, for me, the last straw was I think we were playing Cleveland, and it was like 4-minute offense, right? And it was cold. And Ray came up to me. He was like, all right, you go in now. I was like, I looked at our running back coach, Wilbur. Wilbur looked at Ray and was like, get your ass back in the game.
Oh, bro, when they put you in 4-minute on defense at the end of a game, I'm like, I don't mind, because I kind of miss taking the anger out, like on first and second down, because they made me this like situational guy. But you're like, you kind of look at him with the ultimate side eye, dude. Or like if you'd be out there too late in a preseason game, bro. I remember my last season in St. Louis, and this was my people, dude. I had been on IR for a year and a half. I was just on IR 1 year, bro. I could tell they were ready to cut me. They had me in the fourth quarter of the third preseason game, bro. I'm making plays, getting up, screaming. I'm screaming at the coaches, not like excited to make the play. It fucking sucks, dude, getting old in the NFL.
Yes. Yeah,
and it makes you feel old. And I think one of the reasons guys really struggle after football is it is reinforced to you over and over again at the tail end of your career that you are scrap metal.
I think the way you get out is so important to your confidence in what you do next. So important.
And just, like how positive you can be. Because I am still grinding axes from when I played, and I had this storybook career in a lot of ways, and I'm saying that like trying to be positive. I'm not saying I'm anything special, but like a lot of people would say, Chris, man, golly, dude, look at all the things you did. Ricky, look at all the things you did. But I know me personally, I'm still grinding axes, and I went out on my own. I went out older guys will tell you can only leave the game in a couple ways. It's on their terms, because your body broke or because you got out on your terms. And like so few people do that. So there is something to, if you can walk away on the third way, like you're going to be a healthier person because you're not going to be as spiteful.
Exactly. So true. I think that's probably the most underestimated thing. And when I came back, I told myself my goal is to have an indefinite NFL career that I get to choose. I get to choose when I walk away. And because I think it saved my confidence, because I think it hurts when you want to keep doing something and they tell you no.
And the game, you feel like it's a whole thing of like, how much can I use the game? They think I'm using me, but I'm using the game.
Yep.
You know, and in the end, they're using you, but like you can kind of spin it in your head. Last couple questions here, Rick, and then I'll get you out of here, buddy. The future, like you're 44 years old. I assume you feel pretty good, like the head trauma stuff. You played the most physical position when it comes to this stuff. I mean, like I worry about my buddies that, you know, like my buddy Steven Jackson. I'm like, I watched him tote the rock like 40 times a game in obscurity. I'm like, are you afraid of that kind of possible ticking time bomb that everybody counts as like, hey, when you leave the game, you heard these horror stories. This is what's going to happen to you eventually.
You know, I think I've come to terms. I've come to peace with it. You know, and I think the advantage of coming to peace with it is I won't be in denial. So I'll be present with it if it occurs, as it occurs. But, you know, and I think what we did is it was an intense thing. And yeah, we did damage to our body, but I've done a lot to do everything I can to take care of my body. And so if I go down that route, hopefully I do it with dignity, you know, and
yeah.
and
yeah.
And the joke I told my kids, I get is if,
oh boy, here comes something morbid as fuck.
The joke I told my kid is just keep telling me that I took my medicine already.
Hey man, listen, I think you got to be able to laugh a little bit about your own circumstance. That doesn't mean you're taking the whole thing lightly.
Right.
But another thing is, like, if you spend all day believing that it's a certainty, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not saying that, like, but if you think you're losing your mind or you're supposed to, that can hang over guys' heads.
And they make it worse, you know? And I think part of aging is that I think part of aging is that you lose your memory because you realize certain things just aren't that important anymore.
Selective.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's healthy to lose your memory to a certain extent as you get older. That's what you earn. We've earned the right.
We earn the right to lose a little bit of our memory.
Exactly.
What's on your bucket list, and do you ever get frustrated that you probably can't do it all? And you said you're halfway, 88 years.
Yeah. So my bucket list, and I think I'm going to do this in the next year or so, but is really spend more time in Africa. You know,
come with me, dude. Let's go to Tanzania. Come climb Kilimanjaro with me. Don't say no.
I'm not. I mean, if I'm saying this, like, how can I? How can I? Yeah, that's really my.
All right.
And I need time, and really like just connect to the homeland. It's really, I feel really drawn to do that.
Awesome, man. Well, Ricky, I think we could talk another 6 hours, so I'll get you back here another time, man.
Please.
Yeah, dude, a lot of fun. And check out Ricky's podcast. Give us one more plug for the pod, man.
Yeah, Curious Questions with me, Ricky Williams. Check it out.
And hopefully I'll get him up on the mountain now. I feel like we might have something in the works here. So Ricky Williams, a lot of respect, bro. Thanks for kind of paving the way for guys that just say what they feel.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying what you feel. I think that interview with Dan Patrick was a big deal. It was a big deal.
Do a little bit we can, man. Thank you, bro.